Hello everyone, it's been a little while, and I do apologize for the lack of uploads recently. When Tower of Fantasy dropped, I played that game the moment it was released. I have some thoughts on it, and I'm primarily going over those here and now. But as I was scrolling through my YouTube feed, I essentially only found Tower of Fantasy videos, such as a Genshin Impact veteran tries Tower of Fantasy, or Genshin Impact player plays Tower of Fantasy, and ultimately it got a bit overwhelming and became more annoying. No, I'm not saying that Tower of Fantasy didn't necessarily make this comparison themselves with calling them, or at least marketing themselves as a Genshin killer, but I do think it is a bit much now at this extent where I didn't want to upload a Tower of Fantasy video or a Genshin video and essentially have that to be shoved down everybody's throats, especially with the Genshin Impact livestream that recently happened. So, with that being said, I want to talk about my experiences with Tower of Fantasy. I will be alternating between Genshin Impact gameplay and Tower of Fantasy gameplay. Right off the bat, because I know individuals, especially considering I mentioned that I played Genshin, will kind of be expecting this, I did not go into this game expecting it to be a Genshin killer. I play Genshin Impact, I like Genshin Impact, but I also play a variety of other games such as Elden Ring, Persona 5, I do play occasionally Fallout, Skyrim, etc. So I'm not necessarily looking for a Genshin Impact killer. But given that it was open world, I was willing to give it a chance and see what came of it, and I had an overall middling experience. Now, right off the rip, I also want to discuss the fact that I don't know whether or not us as individuals who are playing on the global server and with the global release are going to have a different experience with those who have been playing on the CN server. I don't know what's transferring over, I don't know what changes there are between the server difference and what patches or updates or any way, shape, or form how the experience differs between sides. So I won't try to lean too heavily on aspects that I think will be fixed later on. Originally, gameplay was going to be featured here of Tower of Fantasy. However, that game refused to allow me to record it. It wouldn't work with OBS, it wouldn't work with Streamlabs. I tried restarting both applications, so with that being said, enjoy whatever background footage is currently playing. Now, in regards to the combat system of the game, I'm going to be very honest. Tower of Fantasy has, in my opinion, a very similar combat system to PGR and a very similar combat system to Honkai Impact. The countering system to me doesn't feel new or unique. In fact, I would say that even if Tower of Fantasy provides you with more movement options given the open world and the fact that you're not necessarily locked into a more linear arena-based style of gameplay, I prefer Honkai and PGR style of combat simply because they feel much more polished and fluid. A lot of the complaints that I've been hearing regarding Tower of Fantasy's combat and fluidity have been boiled down to the game's just on day one release, and to a degree, those could be true. However, at the same time, games like Genshin Impact, Punishing Grey Raven, Honkai Impact, Arknights, Blue Archive, etc. didn't really release with the same fluidity issues, at least to my knowledge, that Tower of Fantasy has. Tower of Fantasy feels like it's a game that should have had one more month in development. At the same time, it's a game that was already released in CN. In China. This is a global release. This isn't the first release of the game itself. So it's had a lot more time to mature, and a lot of those issues haven't necessarily been fixed or smoothed over. The auto attack and normal attack animations, in my opinion, feel less flashy than the skills that I'm supposed to be using. And I know flashiness isn't necessarily the same thing or a good thing, and it's not necessarily something everybody wants. But the skills, in my opinion, are what I would prefer to utilize over normal attacks, not because of their increased damage, but instead because the normal attacks or auto attacks feel like they leave you and lock you into an animation that, depending on the character, can't be stopped for a while. King, for instance, spins a lot with his scythe, and that can kind of lock you into the animation, especially the aerial version. So it's not necessarily, to me, a good thing, but it could be something you personally enjoy. And I want to clarify, if you enjoy Tower of Fantasy, there's nothing wrong with that. I just personally have mixed feelings on it. Graphically, that's subjective. For me personally, the style can be good. I'm not necessarily a fan of the sci-fi aesthetic. I know a lot of people are. And the characters themselves don't necessarily look super appealing to me. There are a few that stand out, but overall, they're just meh. Which I think for a gacha game, they really should come out with their heaviest hitters first. And I know this is going to be annoying, but a lot of the characters they have in-game right now, especially if you're looking at the preset characters that people have made already, just remind me of Genshin characters. And it's vaguely annoying both to hear and both to say. Excluding that, but with the graphical style, it feels very muddy. The textures themselves don't necessarily look super nice, and even though the worlds can be dead, Genshin has a dead world, and this one both have dead worlds, the style and the graphical aesthetic can really make up for that. Whilst there are many features that I like, in this game. There are many features that I don't like. The style is one of them. The world itself feels very muddy, very undersaturated, very colorless and bland, and it's to the extent where exploring doesn't necessarily intrigue me. And if it intrigues you, hey, cool. I'm great that you found a game you like, or that you found something in this game that you enjoy. The world chat. This is a feature that Azurland has, and it's something that not a lot of other games necessarily have in my experience, but based on what I've seen, it severely needs moderation. The first day was pretty awful. The world chat was absolutely terrible. You can ask individuals who were there that first time, but it was not fun. It was very spam heavy. Emote spam wasn't necessarily considered the same thing as normal spam. I don't know if it is now, but all you saw were walls of emojis, which isn't bad. You saw a lot of slander in there. That was pretty much just a standard at that point. Ultimately, in my experience, the world chat can be a good feature, but as of right now and in my first day of playing it, it wasn't the best and honestly should have been handled a lot better. The gacha system itself, I will say I do like that you're guaranteed an SSR in the first 30 pulls. I do like that your pity doesn't get reset. 80 is essentially the max you're going. I do like those two things. I don't necessarily know how I feel overall about the gacha system. It could feel really nice early on, but if you're going for a specific unit, I don't know how I feel about things such as the limited units essentially not necessarily giving you that guarantee, where you can buy them and that transition to limited currency gets carried over into something else, but I don't know how I feel overall about the gacha system. More or less, my thoughts on that will have to wait until later on. The story, in my opinion, is awful. And I know I've talked about other gacha games, and I know I've gotten other gacha games like Arknights for having a really not necessarily bloaty, but a very text-focused story. But Tower of Fantasy, in my opinion, really takes the cake early on. And it's not necessarily that the story is bad. I haven't played it through to the end, don't get me wrong. So I understand the story could improve, it could be a lot better, but early impressions matter. And when you take characters that I've just gotten to meet and you throw me into the situation where a lot is happening, characters that I don't know and characters that I just met have a lot going on with them, I can't find myself getting attached to any of the units themselves, whether I can pull for them or not, to care enough about what's going on. Tower of Fantasy treats you in the first 30 minutes like you've known these characters for months and years, and at the same time, because it does that, whilst what's going on may be interesting, you don't care because you don't know anything about these people. In other games, you're not necessarily put in a situation where the other characters you meet in Blue Archive, in Arknights, in Genshin, in Honkai, the characters you meet aren't immediately put into danger to the point where the game treats it like you care. In Blue Archive, you're essentially just thrown into the game. You have to lead your crew, but ultimately the characters themselves aren't put into grave danger. In Arknights, you're taught early on what's happening. You are in danger. Other people are assisting you. And essentially, from that point on, the game doesn't necessarily treat it like, oh, hey, this character might be hurt. This character might die. And because of that, you're allowed to grow much more naturally attached to units over time. But with Tower of Fantasy trying to take you in and drop you, not at the deep end, but at the end in general, it feels like the story wants to pull you in with the emotion of the situation and not necessarily the characters. And I think that if you're starting out, the characterization matters the most because you have no one to get attached to. I played an EN, just so you know. If you want my honest thoughts, I'd say pick up Tower of Fantasy, play it. For me, I probably will be posting about it here and there as I continue, but overall, it's not going to take my time. It's not going to replace Genshin, it's not going to replace Arknight, it's not going to replace Blue Archive or anything like that. It's just going to be a fun game I can pop on and pop off, and overall, it's a very middling experience. I do hope things improve. I do hope this game becomes more of a consistent, solid thing, but I honestly don't know what to expect going forward. I'm a story-focused guy. I like characterization, I like, good designs, and at the same time, if the gameplay doesn't draw me in, other facets can, and Tower of Fantasy to me has failed to do any of those things. So I unfortunately will have to say I don't like this game, at least not to the extent of the others I previously posted on my channel, and it's why it's been so hard for me to make a video on it, because I just can't find the motivation to do so. But I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. Tell me in the comment section down below. If you like this video, leave a like down below. Dislike it if you dislike it, I understand that, and understand that these are my opinions and yours can be entirely different. Either way, I hope to see you next time, and goodbye.